Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kathy G podcast. The mission of my podcast, as I always say, is for us to realize that we are awesome and we can be even greater and own our power. Most importantly, by realizing that we can bring it through our brand and how we emotionally resonate with the world. And I do this podcast for two reasons, as I always say at this point. I care about humanity deeply, and I want us all to see how great we really are, to be happier and have lives that are easier and more successful and fulfilled. And also, look, I struggle with the same things that you struggle with, my own feelings, sometimes the limiting beliefs. I'm just like everyone else. So some days are ugly and some days are great. And one thing's for sure, my guests on this podcast bring me clarity and data and information and open my heart so I can be greater. And so this time is no difference. No different, excuse me. My guest is a good friend of mine. How good? Well, I really look at people. Time is not a duration thing for me in terms of how well I feel like I'm connected to a person. So James Keshavarz, and I say that with my Iranian accent, my Persian accent, is Chief Wellness Officer at Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher. And he's also, get this folks, Master Resilience Trainer for the Air Force as a medical reservist. Welcome, James, my fellow Zoroastrian, Persian, I don't know how you want to put it, but my fellow person in the law, also doing a lot of things we have in common with our plight. Welcome to my podcast.
So wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is where people are like, well, how do you know him? And I'm always trying to think back, and I never do it before we go on air because I want it to be a very natural conversation. How did James and I meet? And do you remember? I don't.
So I was really getting connected with a lot of the various Persians in the legal industry because I had done a post on LinkedIn on Nowruz, and I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, that's how we originally got connected. I was talking about how in the past I never talked much about my my background, and it's really easy when you're Persian growing up in Los Angeles. You can blend in easily. It's no problem whatsoever. The way that a lot of us look is it's funny. I like to play the game of oh, what do you say, oh, Keshavarz, that sounds so nice. Well, they don't say it like that. Only Kathy says it perfect actually. They say, what's your background? And I'll say, it's one of my favorite questions. They, oh, what do you think? And then they'll look at me and they'll say, well, you look like you could be of like South American descent. Are you Latin? If I'm in LA, right? And when I used to live, or when I was spending some time out in the Pacific, I had individuals thought that I was of some kind of Pacific Islander descent. I've had individuals think that I was just simply Caucasian in the past, even though I have a darker complexion. So it's a very interesting experience of not growing up wearing my culture on my sleeve, especially during the time that I grew up, where if you were identified as Middle Eastern, it was not a good thing, especially as a child, growing up in the 80s as a child, and then as a young adult, in the post 9/11 era as well. And it just, we would usually be followed by some kind of joke about inappropriate jokes about terrorism, or a joke about flying my magic carpet to school or something along the lines of that, which I always had fun with. It's no problem at all. But it's interesting how that kind of socialization led me to really not feel as comfortable with my own name. My middle name is Behdad, and I don't I until recently, I would never introduce myself in my full name. I never write it down. I had people say like, "Oh wow, that sounds like a rough name. Does that mean like you're gonna blow someone up. Doesn't actually no. It very much so is associated with empathy, kindness, and giving. So interesting interesting choice there of
I
assigning
identify with
definition.
everything you say. I remember being that kid in school, and I hated the first day class when they would take roll, and then they couldn't. I always knew when they got to me, right? Because my maiden last name is Mobed Shahi. Mobed is the Zoroastrian priest. Shah is Shah, right? And so I would get so embarrassed, and I would shrink down in my seat, and there was a lot of trauma there, honestly. I had to work through a lot of that trauma, and there's still some baggage there. I was at a training, to your point, and the master trainer, there was only like 20 of us in the training. He skipped over saying my name. He said everybody else's name and my name. Afterwards, I went up to him because I've learned to use my voice, and I said, "Hey, could you please practice saying my name? Because when you don't, it brings up some of my baggage from being a child and the teachers not being able to say it." And he looked at me and he got it immediately. Said, "Please forgive me. I will say your name correctly." And I said, "Yeah, please say it correctly. It's not Katie, it's Katsy." And I go along with the flow, like you say, but every once in a while, it's like, hey, there's trauma and having to always, oh, don't apologize for saying Katie, it's okay. And I mean that. People are sincere, but like I have to make them feel good. So I get what you're talking about, loud and clear. So you started going into your story a little bit as you were saying how we met one another. Tell us more about your story and who you are, and fill in the gaps. So now everybody knows that you're from LA. We assume you're born in LA, and tell us how you got to be who you are and what you're doing. Is that
Oh
a,
wow,
a big ask? But
that's a big ask. Yes.
however way you want to
Um,
say it, and I'll interject, and we'll just build it out the way it's supposed to. I trust the divine rule of all this.
of course, absolutely. Well, uh, I think that the best way to really uh, kind of tell my story is really not about kind of what I've done or any of those extrinsic things that will get you into a room so you could, get you into the club. But really as to like really just who I am and how much I've benefited from others. Really, at the end of the day, I couldn't be where I am today if it weren't for so many individuals in my life and individuals that don't even know I exist that have helped me significantly get to where I am. So like you mentioned, I am from Los Angeles, more specifically the area that is no, associated or known as Glendale, but La Crescenta is this more specific spot that I'm from, which is kind of a north of Los Angeles area that used to be a very interesting little history. It used to be where individuals would go to help with asthma. It was a asthma place. Dr. Briggs was one that has created this entire retreat for individuals living in Los Angeles with asthma. You would go there and when you get up to if you're ever able to just take the 2 freeway up to where it ends and land in the beautiful town of Montrose and La Crescenta, you would say, "Wow, I feel like I'm in the mountains right now." And that's where I grew up, and I grew up with just different types of challenges. I have dyslexia. I have different types of learning disabilities. I'm neurodivergent in many ways. I won't go through the whole list, but many know about my ADHD and dyslexia and just different ways of thinking. And that really was a challenge in school. But I also, much like I also was very good about being authentic to myself, sticking to the goals that I had, despite these various challenges. I also had zero athletic ability, so I couldn't really harness that either. But what I did learn was early in life is the more you work at something, the more you learn from the various challenges that you may have, and you analyze it with pure awareness of every aspect of that challenge, the better chance you have of getting better.
Now,
And this is a really, really funny way that I had that epiphany. I was playing a video game as a kid, and in the game there was no like save button, or there was no whatever you would like to say. And you had to jump from area to area to area on this game. And some areas, if you jumped, you would fall because the ground would come out from underneath you. In some areas, if you jump, it would shoot you back to the start. And different areas, all the different types of challenges that video games usually have, right? And what I did as a kid, because this is a game that to this day, a lot of people cannot get past the second level. What I was doing is I would write down, okay, so if I go there, it does this. I learned from that. Now I won't do that next time. If I go here, it does this. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, I'm good at this, not good at that, vice versa. So I was getting, before she even wrote her book, I was getting lessons on the growth mindset from Carol Dweck. And I was able to channel that into other aspects of my life as well, much like my struggles in academics, my struggles in athletics. So it wasn't just pure determination. It wasn't just pure pushing through, if you will. It was strategized. So that was a big part of being able to get through a lot of that.
so this is very interesting. Let's unpack that for the folks that are listening to this who say, well, what do I do with this information? You said it very eloquently before you got into the video game example. You said you were just being authentic. And so the question is for people listening going, well, that must have just, how did you do that as a young child? How was it okay with you? How did you stay so self-aware? I didn't do that. I guess it must mean I can't do that. What do you say to people who might be listening thinking that's their takeaway when I don't believe it is?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. So there's a big difference between reflecting and ruminating, right? Well, a lot of times if we have a challenge that we're experiencing or that we're perceiving, a perceived challenge, that's also a thing, right? We, those of us who have not been trained in resilience, and resilience by its actual positive psychology definition. That's resilience is used loosely quite a bit,
Very much.
but it's when I'm talking about resilience, I'm talking about using the actual tools that were rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy. So what we can do is, for one, see, are we ruminating on this, bringing in data that has not been verified, or are we reflecting on what is going on? So let's say that we are simply trying to improve our ability to play the piano,
Okay.
and we hit the wrong key,
Okay.
and all of a sudden the self-compassion disappears, and we say, "Oh, I just am horrible at this. I can never figure these things out." Well, we challenge those thoughts, right? We
Right.
look at that data as if it was an experiment, and we say, all right, I always get this wrong. Well, if that was true, how could I possibly be where I am right now? So instead of ruminating, we're now reflecting. All right, I have had struggles with this for way too long, right? All right, based on whose standards?
Yeah.
Based on whose standards? And then we go back to the why. Why are we doing this in the first place? That can help us out quite a bit as well.
Excellent.
We need to look at a lot of the different challenges that we have with humility too. Now, why are we so hard on ourselves when it comes to these things? Because we think that we need to be, because society maybe has told us that. And why? It's because we keep we keep not breaking the cycle. We have individuals that have struggled with imposter syndrome, that are in positions of leadership, that are now giving others different types of challenges that can either create the imposter syndrome or even manifest it even more, right?
Very much so. And I think to your point, so that was really helpful. I hope everyone really got takeaway, pause it, rewind this and listen again to the difference between reflection and rumination as a way of staying authentic. And imposter syndrome is certainly something we see so much in the legal industry. And to your point, it's because we need to do it perfectly. And if we don't do it perfectly, so, I've always researched this. What kind of personality is driven to law school? The person who seeks that perfection, who has a lot of baggage from their childhood for being told that they're not good enough. And so law school is just another layer of doing it perfectly. But then you get there and you have all of the stressors add to the mix, and then you come out, and to your point, there's people that have gone before you who have not cleared this up for themselves or addressed it or willing even to look at it. And so that adds a whole layer of complexity to your life. And now what do you do? Do you stay the course, or do you end up like my clients? My clients oftentimes show up when their back's just against the wall. They're like, I can't live like this anymore. I make millions and millions of dollars. I'm successful, but I'm unfulfilled. I can't have a life like this. I'm like, well, I'm not a career coach. I'm not going to find you like a job flipping burgers. But in essence, that's generally oftentimes what we're looking at, like just the self-reflection of being able to be authentic enough with yourself to even start that conversation and say, I don't want to live my life this way. I want to live my life who I am. Curiosity is, I think, the counterpoint to your reflection,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So that's a beautiful concept. So how do you take that into your work, whether that's at Gibson Dunn, which I'm sure everyone, but sometimes I have audience members who are not in the legal world. Gibson Dunn is, give us the profile of the size of the law firm, whatever else would put it into perspective for folks.
We're a very big firm. We're
That's good.
um, 21 offices across the world, over 2,000 lawyers.
Okay, so that gives everyone an idea of what concept of where you work in. So how do you take this work? And you have your MAP, am I correct? Do you have your Master's of
A little
MAP?
bit different than that. A little bit different. Yeah.
So
So
how do you
my
follow that into your work? Keep
yeah. I guess a very short, quick educational background. I have a lot of education because of dyslexia. Once I finally learned how to read as a young adult, yeah, I I wanted to just continue, and I have never stopped my education. I've just continued on, and anytime I look for a way that I can help others more, that's what I'll pursue the next. So I have an associate's in healthcare management. I have a bachelor's in pre-law with an emphasis, yeah, bachelor's in history with an emphasis on pre-law. I have a master's in exercise physiology with an emphasis on performance enhancement and injury prevention. I have an MBA with an emphasis on business behavior and healthcare management. And I'm finishing up yeah, I'm just waiting for the last step of approval for my dissertation, a Doctor of Psychology, a PsyD, PSYD.
yes.
Um,
Okay.
and I have a plan for my next one too.
Wow. Wow.
Um,
A lifelong learner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so we have our core values, right? And one of those for me is empathy and to be able to help others. And I believe that for me, and this isn't true for everyone, of course, but for me, my approach is I, especially having a science background, everything that I do should be based on evidence. And the only way that I can really guarantee that is to continue the education. Um, and that's just been one way that I haven't burnt out on education because of it being aligned with who I truly want to continue to be. And every career I've ever had has been aligned with that goal of helping others, teaching others, and helping others in any aspect I can, whether it be helping them individually or like what I've experienced where an organization supports you as well. What I've experienced with the Air Force, what I've experienced with the firm that I work for, and a lot of different organizations I'm a part of. So it's it's not a so within imposter syndrome, you have a characteristic where you have an information hoarder, right? They call it the expert. There's
Mhm.
5 different characteristics of imposter syndrome. And you can, every single one of those characteristics can either be a good thing or a bad thing. And it comes down to one very, very simple concept. And I always ask individuals this: are you intrinsically motivated? And they ask me, well, can you define that? I say, oh, it's much like integrity. So integrity is doing the right thing even if no one is watching. So much like if I've been made fun of in the past because integrity is a very big thing for me as well. I am the kind of person that will walk a little bit further to use the crosswalk even if no cars are around. I'm the kind of person that uses my turn signal to go into my driveway at my house. But you know what?
It
It's
works for
it's
you.
just who it's in there. So what's intrinsic motivation? If integrity is doing the right thing if no one's around, intrinsic motivation is doing things to strive forward for excellence, right? Even if you would never get any recognition for it.
Yes, yes. And that is a morality, it's aligned with integrity and morality, I think, right? It's just doing right by, okay, let's just use the G word, doing right by God, whatever that means for you, right? I mean, or something that you can't really put a value in terms of what you see externally in the world reflecting back to you and just saying, I have faith that this is who I am, this is what drives me.
Absolutely.
I think,
Yes.
and perhaps that's one of your biggest lessons to our audience, James, and why I love you so much that you don't have to be perfect to understand these premises and adapt them for your own life. It's just a lot of lawyers or anyone listening, professionals say, well, how am I supposed to keep doing this day by day? And I tell them some version of what you're talking about and you're living it. So please pay attention, audience, that look, what works for you is what works for you, and that you can sleep well at night and get up well at night. And I don't need you to be religious or put any label on it, political or anything. It's just, hey, this is how I choose to live my life because I'm congruent with who I am deep down inside. And my husband is very much like you, like his sense of morality. You can call it integrity, I call it morality, whatever, but like through the roof. And it's just who he is. And sometimes he'll look at me and go, no, I'm not gonna do that. And it's not like I'm amoral, but he's like, he's the turn signal at the, he's like, okay, move the trash off of the sidewalk because it's 5:01 and we're not allowed to have it on the sidewalk past 5 o'clock, right? And I'm like, has anybody got the clock out? And he's like, does it matter? And I'm like, no, sir, it does not matter. And so I think if every lawyer, every person that was facing a challenge went inside and chose to look at their power from an intrinsic place rather than from what they're seeing displayed outward in society as a reflection, I think we would all be way ahead of the game. That's how I choose to live my life. It sounds very much like how you're choosing to live your life. And does that show up in your work with lawyers or their clients or at the Air Force as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I should be very clear that all anything I talk about is my own opinions, and it's not the opinions of the Air Force or Gibson Dunn. And
So noted.
and it's we and I will say that the biggest thing is there's I think of behavioral science when I first think about like how an entire group, right? We've got like entire groups that are starting to experience a challenge together, right? So with with the legal industry, it's unmanaged stress, it's anxiety, it's depression, burnout,
Yes.
and the the interesting thing is you you have from a behavioral science standpoint, whenever you have momentum in one direction, it will start to create that challenge in a bit of a snowball effect, right? And I'll take two amazing psychologists right now. You got Robert Cialdini, and then you've got Daniel Goleman, right? So you've got the concept of social peer suasion, not persuasion, but peer suasion, where we start to believe a lot of the facts, or we start to act very similar to those around us, our peers. And then you've got Goleman's research on emotional contagion, right? And I think about how do you have so emotional contagion is exactly what it sounds like, where you literally can have a certain type of emotion and behavior that will be reflected within your those around you because it will be given off.
Yes, I call that emotional resonance. Agreed.
Yes, absolutely. I remember reading that in your book, and I thought immediately about the neurobiology of emotional contagion, and the 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 reason why this is all important is we have a if you want systemic change, a true cultural change, there has to be enough of the individuals that have experienced the change to show that vulnerability, right? To start to really, really get movement. And now I'm not only talking about the legal profession, this is true within the medical profession and engineering and military as
Question,
well.
what does vulnerability have to do with it? I can hear my audience members asking.
Yeah, so social persuasion, right? So I'll give you a grand example. I'm in the a grand example. That seems like a silly thing to say. I'll give you an example. Uh, I I have used this myself in my positions of leadership, where I'm respected for all the what's, right? The trophies, the medals, the blah blah blah, the accolades, which don't really mean a lot to me. If you don't believe me, come to my house, and you'll see the degrees sitting on the floor and the medals sitting in the closet. Um, but they do work when it comes to,
Here
from a
and
leadership standpoint, motivating others, right? So I have individuals that respect me for those things that they have value for, right? Well, on the same note, I'll explain to them the challenges that I've experienced in the public setting. I'll put myself out there because I am a person of pure humility. Um, I truly, truly am saying, how did I get here? And I know it's because of others,
you do
right?
that so well. If anybody's wondering, please go on James's LinkedIn profile. He writes such beautiful prose, but it's from such an authentic, vulnerable place. It's masterful, but it's real. It's not masterful as in faked or, somebody crafted it to prove a point. It's just who he is. So keep going. I had to interrupt.
Thank you, thank you. Unless I have more than one personality, I do believe it's me that's crafting them. Um, what I've experienced is by me, whether it be working with a high school pole vaulter back in a previous career, right, or a collegiate athlete, and talking about my athletic struggles, despite various accolades that I've had, that helps get them through the challenge. Now, here's the thing when it comes to vulnerability and empathetic communication skills in general. Only use it to motivate, don't use it to put the spotlight on yourself either. So there's a big difference between someone just trying to tell their story so they can continue to get more, you know, oh,
Woe is
look
me.
at where you are today, as in, that's just how much stronger you are. There's a big difference between that and saying, here's just a little tiny piece of what I experienced. And yes, I had a really, really hard time during that. But let's bring it back to you. Let's bring it back to everyone, right? What can we all do when we are experiencing those adversities,
I
right?
think really what you're going to, if I may interrupt you, please forgive me, is this notion of community and being in service to the bigger picture and to the greater whole.
Oh, yes.
Right. I just sense that from you, which is part of why I respect you so much and I enjoy talking to you. And I really want the audience to get that. We call it in neurolinguistics programming the ecology model. It can't just be good for you. It's a three-legged stool. Is it good for you? Is it good for the overall organization? And is it good for society? And this is not about recycling at work. A lot of my CO clients are like, oh, we have a good recycling program. I'm like, no, no, that's not what we're talking about. The deeper meaning, right? The bigger purpose, correct? Um, that I think has to draw on our vulnerabilities, but can't just be about us in that. Like when I had breast cancer, I used to blog about it, but I was very careful to stop the blog posts when I sensed that people were like, oh, so sorry. I'm like, that's not why I'm blogging about this, right? I'm bringing it back to you so I can share my experience. It is healing for me, but it's also, what can you do with this information to make your life better, grow, evolve?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And from a leadership standpoint, always know that as you gather this knowledge, as you learn more about emotional intelligence and how it can improve social awareness, as you learn more about the science of persuasion, right?
Mhm.
As you learn more about all these aspects, it can be used for good or it can be used for evil. It's very, very Star Wars. It's very, very force driven. I'll give you a great, example of that is, the Emperor in Star Wars. He had a superpower of empathy. He really, really was good at manipulating individuals because he could see what it was that their needs were,
And then
right?
what he wanted
And he would
back.
get them to like him. And that's how he was able to go from really a rebel teenager to eventually being much like Julius Caesar, elected as, a temporary um, control of the entire republic, and then eventually, took it all over. But it can be flipped on the other side too, right? We always talk about the downward spiral. There's such a thing as an upward spiral. We talk about, one thing can lead to another and all these different types of aspects. We talked about that emotional contagion. Well, it doesn't have to be an emotional contagion of high stress. It can also be an emotional contagion of, hey, let's be rock stars at what we're doing. Let's have that more scientific mindset when it comes to how we're going to run this business, whatever the business may be, and ensure that we have trust on the team.
Mhm.
Ensure that individuals are excited to be on the team, right? And now you have motivation that is sustainable, just like you said, Gati, human sustainability, right? You implement transformational leadership, you implement emotional intelligence training, and and then you also can help with a lot of the cultural aspects where an individual feels that they're intellectually stimulated, they feel that they belong, they are proud, and they want to continue to be a part of that group. They
Yes.
want to be continued to be a part of the group. Where if they had an opportunity to leave, they wouldn't do it because this is this is an amazing culture that's aligned with my core values, and they actually know who I am, even though they don't know me personally, right? To the point that you have individuals that they believe so much in certain organizations and teams, they're willing to take a bumper sticker and put it on their car for free advertising for
Right.
that company because they believe so much in that. They're proud of that group, right? And some even get tattoos, permanent ink, right? So could you imagine?
That's alignment, right? Definitely.
Could you imagine someone getting a Kaiser Permanente tattoo on their bicep because their chief medical officer implemented a program that made them feel so proud
Wow. Wow.
of
What
where
you're
they work?
saying is what I talk often in my coaching sessions with my CEOs and senior leader clients. I was just having this conversation with a CFO client yesterday, and he was like, how do I get this person that does not directly report to me, but I need them to understand that just because they're pulling numbers, they're not really effective because they're not thinking about those numbers critically in a way that will get results. And I said, well, you're talking about the age-old question that James, you're talking about. Like, where is that inspiration and that motivation? And here's what you're saying. Please, audience, listen to this very carefully. What James is saying, if I'm summarizing you correctly, if I may, is it's about the worth of people rather than just giving them processes and telling them to do stuff. Everybody wants to focus on just give me a process. I probably hear that once a week from people. Just give me a process to implement. I'm like, people implement those processes. People work through the processes if there's no foundational setting for the people. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Bring in the science, do the numbers, prove it, the efficacy of it. But remember, there is a group concept here, and people have emotions and hearts and traumas and baggage, and that's the beauty of being people. And that's why I love highlighting people like you, James Keshavarz, because you bring all that to the table. You're like, hey, I'm dyslexic. I have several CEO clients that are dyslexic. No one knows, unfortunately, except for me, oftentimes. I'm like, why are we hiding this? You became CEO having this. And they're like, oh, I don't know. And so I really make people rethink these things. And I want people to see people like you in action to really understand that. So on that note, you and I could talk for hours.
We have.
We have, yeah, but for this point, I'm happy to do a part two of the podcast. So let people digest it and come back and maybe answer their questions. Part two of this podcast on this session, though, what's one challenge you're facing today or one thing that's keeping you up at night that we could work through? And
So, we talk about um the being believing so much in something that you would almost be afraid to not be a part of it anymore. And I think that something that I have personally struggled with is that kind of becoming a reality for me with my career in the military. One, just simply obviously getting older, um, but beyond that, having the various medical and health challenges I've had over the last few years with my spinal challenges and various other types of challenges and fear is definitely not something that should be a motivator ever.
no,
Uh, And I've been really trying to rewire and rethink all of those different types of basically high stressors around the not the likelihood, we'll just call it the possibility of sunsetting something so important to me. And a lot of times it's also this big giant fear of, if I leave, what's going to happen with all those who I've been helping,
Yeah.
all those different things I've been trying to do. And that is a cognitive trap. I think that's one of the only areas that, not, well, no, it has to be more, obviously, but that's definitely an area that has been loud to me, that I personally maybe lack in humility, is the fear of, if I'm not doing it, who else will?
Hmm.
And I need to understand that sometimes there are others that will do it.
But that's a
That's a
very,
cognitive trap.
it's a very good challenge, and it is a common trap. And I'm so glad you're so sincere and authentic and voice it. Again, my deep respect. So for those of you who are listening who this resonates with, here's what I've found to be true. Fear is a common negative emotion. When we do, in being a master practitioner of neurolinguistics programming, when we do breakthrough sessions and we release the negative emotions, the first one we release is anger, because anger is got the most, it's the most palpable, the most people use, and the most power to destroy and kind of be thrown about, and most people can control themselves through anger. Second one is fear, though, and fear is the real underlying emotion that runs all of this. And so your point about fear of sunsetting it and the fear of, what if I'm not the one doing it? People who are doers like you and me, I used to be called a workhorse. Maybe some people would still call me that. I've worked very diligently to no longer be a workhorse. I don't think it's a badge of honor at all. But think to yourself, sit with this. What is the harmony of being humble and realizing that we don't need to be everywhere all the time, that the energetic imprint of what we put out there, it can be carried on by others. I mean, I know your wife is getting ready to have a child. It's been publicly announced, so I can say it. So, teaching our children that, hey, you don't have to do it all. You can just have faith that what you put out there, if you do it well, with heart, with dignity, backed with science, left and right brains working together, that you've done your part. And like you said at the very beginning of this, I caught what you said. Some people that have influenced you that don't even know you, right? I think that's the ultimate beauty of the humility of saying, I am the prize. I'm really good at what I do, and I'm a gift to those I serve. Yet I don't have to always be everywhere, because I appreciate who I am so much. I love myself so much that I know where my boundaries are. The phrase is boundaries, but I take it further than boundaries. I look at it as, what do I want to do for me now versus for others? And when we say that, I have found, try this on, audience and James, I have found when I say that in true congruency with who I am and my true being, it's like it translates into showing up for others, because I'm saying, this works for me. And I love myself with true love, not like I have to go out there and shout it from the rooftops, or I need a Maserati to prove I love myself. Like, just true, humble love. It's very challenging, though, I found. So try that on, because sometimes it's like, if I say I love myself, I don't know. What does that amount to? What am I doing differently? How am I being differently? Am I showing up and saying, I'm going to sunset that? But, ooh, does that rub up against how am I in service if I'm just loving myself? There's a lot of thoughts, and there's a great book out there for those of you who I have not told this to. I tell this to all my clients. They've pretty much all read it. It's by Kamal Ravikant. and it's called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. I don't know if you've heard of it or not, James, but it's a short book and short story. Kamal was CEO of a San Francisco tech company, and all sorts of things happens in his life. And then he figures this formula out, and his buddies say, please put it in a book. And he says, oh no, I don't want to do that because I'm a CEO. I don't talk about love and mushy stuff. And they said, but it works. Look at you. Like you went 180. And he did. And it's just been a fabulous book. So really go intrinsic on that one and look at, as you shift into a phase of being a father, having a new title, status, role put on you, I think that level of self-love becomes even more important. And then from there, you can choose to release that negative emotion of fear. And once clients release that negative emotion in a breakthrough session, it is just gone. The candle is out. Now, you do have to keep working on not allowing the unconscious mind to sabotage you because it's used to a certain level of pattern and programming. But once the unconscious mind agrees to let go of that negative emotion of fear, like you alluded to, it's no longer conscious. It's not a choice you're making anymore, and your behavior patterns shift. So those decisions I find become easier and easier to make because it's obvious. I'm sunsetting this because I don't want to be in physical pain and it doesn't work for me anymore. I don't know, I'm making up stuff now around what you think or what your views are, but and how I want to show up with this work in my life and how I want to be in service. Your fundamental core doesn't change, your values don't change. It's just how you apply the negative emotions as part of the control cycle, I find changes. Does that help? Does that give you anything to think about?
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And really, honestly, it at the end of the day, it's new ch transition in life, right? It's a shift.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and that's scary for all of us. Fear again, right? But it's also what you said earlier, reflection around curiosity, like, wow, what's going to happen now? How exciting. I mean, you can look at it just as easily that way, right? And letting go of stuff is very important. A lot of people may call me a lot of things, but one thing is true for me. Maybe it's because I'm a Gemini. I don't know if you're all into the astrology of it. I'm not particularly, but I am good with letting things go when I just want to shift and I just let go so I can find something new because I'm moving forward. And that for me is a fresh start concept as well. I could be better, but I'm always growing into that. So I always look at it like, wow, what's going to happen now? How kind of exciting, right? Trying things on. So try it on. I mean, you are one to be out there doing things. I don't need to tell you to be brave. You already are. It's just some things feel different. Like, hey, I can do this with everything, but these things, physical is very important because I truly believe the physical body and the mind, the connection. What's his name wrote that famous book, Body Keeps Score. The body's a messenger to you. And so I think your body's talking to you and telling you something. So do it the way you've always done it and sit and listen, reflect on what your body's talking about and see where it fits into the overall pattern of your life. That's my 2 cents worth. So James Keshavarz, we're at the end of our time. Thank you for showing up. How can people reach you if they're trying to find you? And if you have one final summary of all your beautiful lessons and then some, we'd love to hear it.
So very easy to find me. You can find me on LinkedIn. And if you message me, just please give me just know that I'm not ignoring you. I will get to you eventually. I just have a lot of I have a lot of messages, and I try to get to all of them. And so depending on for whatever reason you are listening to this podcast from this amazing human being, woman, in the well-being profession, whatever brought you here, just know that because you've done that, you've already increased your self-awareness. And my, I guess, advice would be to always trace things back to your core values so you can maintain that authenticity. So look and reflect, what have I been doing? Has it been aligned with my core values? And if it is, celebrate it and share with someone that maybe supported you with those core values that, hey, because you did this, it helped me this way. And that's a big part of that contagion, right? Let's continue that contagion. I have seen cultural change in a lot of the organizations I'm a part of. I've seen cultural change in just the block that I live on in Redondo Beach,
Mm.
where we started bringing in each other's trash cans.
Mm.
And when I first came in, people didn't really know each other too well. And I just, you know what? I said, I'm going to go ahead and bring in the trash cans because I have an extra minute or two. So I started bringing my neighbor's trash cans for him. And that turned into a, hey, I saw you on my ring. Thank you for doing that. It didn't take much. And we saw an entire shift. And I just did it a few times. And next thing you know, it was a ripple effect of so many more different types of changes where we got to know each other better. We started looking after each other better. Community is defined by the American Psychological Association as a very important protective factor for our mental health.
Oh, well said. So well said. Beautiful. We're not in a war, we're in a community. We truly are. That is not my phrase. I've totally forgotten the sociologist or no, environmental scientist who came up with that phrase. But what a beautiful place to end it. So please go pick up your neighbor's trash. Just kidding, but truly, what a beautiful example of that. Thank you so much for joining me, James. It was a pleasure. For all
Always.
listening, please take this material. I'm hoping you got one thing that you can implement in your personal life, into your career, into your business, to bring in ease and grace and fulfillment and success, of course, and pass it on. Whether you're actually sharing the podcast link or sharing the learnings, I don't care. However way it gets out there to make the world a better place, that's the goal here. And thank you all for listening. And until next time, Keti G out.